Someone signs up for a free trial on a Tuesday afternoon, fully intending to cancel before it charges. They set a reminder, maybe even write it on a sticky note. 3 weeks later, a charge shows up on their bank statement for a service they forgot they ever signed up for. This isn't because they're forgetful or bad with money. This happens to millions of people every single month, across nearly every subscription-based product on the market, and the uncomfortable truth is that it isn't an accident. The gap between "I'll definitely remember to cancel this" and "wait, when did this start charging me?" isn't a personal failure. It's a carefully engineered outcome, built into the structure of the free trial itself. And once you see how the mechanism works, you'll never look at a "Start your free trial" button the same way again. It's tempting to feel a little embarrassed the first time it happens, as a better organization or a stronger memory would have prevented it. But that framing quietly lets an entire industry off the hook for a pattern it deliberately built and profits from its scale. Free trials are everywhere now, and on the surface, they look like a genuinely generous offer. Try the product, see if you like it, cancel anytime if it's not for you. No risk involved. Streaming services, software tools, meal kits, fitness apps, and cloud storage providers all lean heavily on this model. And according to subscription industry research, the number of companies offering free or discounted trial periods has grown substantially over the past decade, as recurring revenue became the dominant business model across software and media. But there's a quiet statistic sitting underneath all of that generosity. Multiple studies on subscription conversion rates have found that a large majority of people who start a free trial end up converting into paying customers, not because they actively decided the product was worth paying for, but because they simply never got around to canceling before the trial ended. This is such a well-known outcome inside the industry that companies have built forecasting models around it. Free trial conversion isn't treated as an uncertain outcome. It's treated as a predictable percentage, baked directly into revenue projections before a single free trial user even signs up. Investor presentations and earnings calls for subscription companies routinely reference trial-to-paid conversion rates as a stable, forecastable line item, the same way a retailer might forecast foot traffic during a holiday season, which tells you something important. This isn't a side effect the company is trying to minimize. It's a revenue mechanism the company is actively planning around. Let's start with the basic mechanics of how a typical free trial actually gets structured, because the design choices matter more than they first appear to. Almost every free trial requires a credit card up front, even though nothing is technically being charged during the trial period itself. This single design decision changes the entire psychology of the interaction. Instead of a genuine trial where someone tries a product with nothing at stake, the person is opted into a future payment by default, and canceling requires an active decision and action, rather than simply doing nothing. The technical workflow behind this is consistent across almost every platform. A person enters payment information to start the trial. The system stores that payment method securely. A countdown begins, usually somewhere between 7 and 30 days, and if no cancellation action is taken before that countdown reaches 0, the store payment method is automatically charged for a full subscription period, often billed annually or for a multi-month package rather than just a single month. The default outcome of doing nothing is not nothing happens. The default outcome of doing nothing is you get charged. This is where an invisible design principle takes over, one that behavioral researchers refer to as the power of defaults. Humans are measurably more likely to stick with whatever the default option is, even when a slightly different action would clearly serve their interest better, simply because taking action requires more cognitive effort and more perceived risk than doing nothing. When the default is set to, "You will be charged unless you act," the mental burden of the entire timeline shifts onto the person's memory and future planning ability, both of which are extremely fragile compared to a well-optimized software workflow. A calendar reminder set 3 weeks in advance has to survive vacation, a busy week at work, a change in phone, and a dozen other small life disruptions between the moment it's set and the moment it's supposed to fire. The company's system, on the other hand, doesn't forget anything. It simply waits patiently for the countdown to hit 0, and then executes exactly as designed. Beyond just relying on human forgetfulness, many platforms add additional friction specifically to the cancellation process itself, friction that doesn't exist anywhere in the sign-up process. Signing up typically takes 2 or 3 clicks. Canceling, on plenty of well-known platforms, has historically required navigating through multiple settings menus, sometimes contacting customer support directly, sometimes even calling a phone number during limited business hours, or being shown a series of retention offers and discounts before the cancellation is finally processed. Regulatory bodies in multiple countries have taken direct notice of this asymmetry. The U.S. Federal Trade Commission introduced a click-to-cancel rule specifically targeting subscription services, requiring that canceling a subscription be no more difficult than signing up for one, precisely because the friction gap between starting and stopping had become such a widespread and well-documented pattern across the industry. Two real-world examples make this pattern especially clear. Several major streaming and software companies have faced public criticism and regulatory scrutiny after users described lengthy, multi-step cancellation processes buried several menus deep, sometimes described by users as intentionally exhausting compared to the single-click sign-up flow that got them into the subscription in the first place. A separate pattern shows up around trial length and billing timing specifically, where companies have been found to time trial and notifications, when they exist at all, in ways that arrive right before a weekend or right as trial periods quietly convert into full annual charges rather than monthly ones, meaning a forgotten cancellation costs significantly more than someone might assume based on just a few dollars a month. Mental model formed at signup. Consumer complaint databases in several countries show recurring themes across totally unrelated industries: streaming, software, meal delivery, all describing the same basic shape of complaint. An easy sign-up, a vague or missing reminder, and a cancellation process that took far longer to complete than the original sign-up ever did. This challenges a common assumption people bring to free trials, which is that the offer is primarily a marketing tool designed to showcase product quality and let genuine interest drive the eventual purchase decision. In reality, a meaningful portion of trial-to-paid conversion is manufactured not through product quality at all, but through the structural asymmetry between how easy it is to start and how difficult it is to stop. The friction point isn't a lack of product value. Plenty of these products are genuinely useful. The friction point is that the business model doesn't need every converted customer to have made an active, informed choice. It only needs a predictable percentage of people to forget, and behavioral defaults reliably produce exactly that percentage, month after month, at scale. Zoom out, and this default-based design pattern shows up far beyond subscriptions. Retirement plans that automatically enroll employees see dramatically higher participation than plans requiring an opt-in decision, precisely because of the same default effect, just used here for a purpose most people would consider beneficial rather than extractive. Organ donation registration rates differ enormously between countries that use opt-in versus opt-out systems, again driven by the same underlying psychological mechanism. The tool itself, the power of a well-chosen default, is completely neutral. What differs is the intent behind how it gets pointed, either toward outcomes that clearly serve the person experiencing them, or toward outcomes that primarily serve the company designing the interaction. As more of daily life gets structured around recurring payments and automatic renewals, recognizing when a default is working for you versus quietly working against you becomes a genuinely practical skill. It's worth noticing, too, that the same design toolkit gets described in glowing terms when it nudges people towards saving for retirement, and in far more critical terms when it nudges people toward an unwanted subscription charge, even though the underlying mechanism is identical in both cases. The difference was never the technique. It was always who the outcome was built to benefit. So the next time a Start Your Free Trial button appears, it's worth remembering what that button actually represents. It isn't simply an invitation to try something risk-free. It's the beginning of a countdown that only works one way unless you personally intervene, built by people who understand human memory and habit far better than most people understand their own. The free trial itself might be perfectly genuine. The forgetting was never an accident. It was the plan working exactly as designed.